let me start with a few scope and limitation points. The first one is that this is not intended to be an extensive study of the budget statement and what it entitles, because within 60 minutes of engagements, there's only so much that you can really discuss. And we want to look at it from a businessman's perspective about where the opportunities and the challenges and how we can engage in building the partnerships and identifying the actionable opportunities. And it might also be a good idea later on to open the floor for contributions from some of the participants, many of whom I identify from within our circle of businesses and friends, and they have something to contribute. Now, the second point is that keep in mind that the chronology of the budget might already be, as it stands, might be outdated, because from March to today, so many things have happened which have impacted seriously on many of the macroeconomic assumptions and forecasts. Keep in mind that we're coming from an election in 2024, and that the current government has the reset agenda in mind and is rolling out plans to reset and to change the macroeconomic foundations, or to tweak them, let's say, not to change, in order to align with their vision of macroeconomic development. And the third point is to also say that there are some headwinds and there are challenges, but these should be perceived from the purview of opportunities, because every challenge can be perceived as an opportunity, because once you solve that problem, you unlock its benefits. And then the first to unlock these benefits are the ones to profit from it. So we want to, without further ado, let me start with, first of all, painting a bit of a backdrop. Now, this particular narrative builds on four main documents for me. The first one is the Ghana Trade Report 2024, which was recently published by Ghana Statistical Service. Second one is the presentation of the Minister of Finance, which he made during the National Economic Dialogue on the 3rd of March 2025, which set the tone, obviously, to the budget, which was read on 11 March 2025. And then the third document is a budget digest by PricewaterhouseCoopers, which was published on the 20th of March 2025, which digests the nuggets of information and distills it into something that is actually easy enough to retain as general currents, but also bear in mind that that was published in March. And so several things, including the currency oval or round or rectangular office somewhere, and then decide that today is going to do something and it impacts the entire globe. And the fourth, but not last but not least document is the IMF Economic Outlook for Sub-Saharan Africa for April 2025. So these documents, along with the budget statement which you kindly provided, can form a good, solid foundation to try to predict or to forecast or to watch the trends of where the opportunities lie. And I'm sure when the time comes, you can also move the document to particular sections that you want to elaborate in. Tekla, yourself, you were part of a meeting as recent as yesterday, which in itself is a paradigm shift in the area of transport, logistics, and agribusiness. So everything that we have discussed also piles up with the rapidly increasing reflections of the new policy alignments, from the 24-hour economy to the logistic corridors to the shifting of the investment promotion drive, and the new laws that are upcoming, which will also significantly affect what is going on. So let us now try to dig into what is going on. Now, we know that the global GDP growth has been predicted worldwide at an average of 3.2%, and it was forecast at 3.3%. And against that one, Sub-Saharan Africa's GDP growth was forecast at 4.2%, but currently stands at an average of 3.8%. For Ghana, the GDP growth is actually 4%. So we are not only slightly ahead of the sub-Saharan African GDP growth, we're also considerably ahead of the global average GDP growth. And that might be probably based to the soaring minerals and raw materials resources and our economies being not developed enough for a value addition. But then it is part of the policy, part of the boom and bust cycles of raw materials. And now we seem to be seeing the ups after many years of down. Gold currently trades at around 3,300 plus. Cocoa trades at around 9,800 or 8,000. And these alone account for a significant shoring up of the traditional economies of Ghana. But remember that today we are not talking about the traditional export-driven economy. We want to try to talk about the diversification, because diversification itself into non-traditional economic development is part of the necessity to build resilience and sustainability into our economy. Not every time that we experience shock somewhere across the world, it amplifies in a negative way. We want these shocks to amplify in a positive way, or in the best case scenario, not to cause any amplifications or any repercussions. Because business, as you know, Thekla, thrives on predictability and stability. If you wake up a day and decide that today you're abolishing a certain tax, and the next day you are replacing it with a different tax, this messes up with the long-term planning of investors, both potential and current, and then it also undermines the credibility of your country on the international scene. So today we are looking at the businesses and the investors who are based in Ghana, but we're also keeping our sight on foreign investors who are looking at Ghana and comparing and shopping around. Because there's absolutely no reason why finance should come to Ghana just because we are good people, or because the country is great, or because we are hospitable. Businessmen are looking for financial returns on their investments. They're looking for the stability of this investment in the long-term planning. And then they are looking for, in case of failures of some aspects of the promises by the host government, they're looking at redress. They are looking at ways to complain and ways to get their issues solved. So if you can't find all of these critical elements in place, then you have an issue to start with. Now, as we were saying earlier, there were several headwinds that have come to meet us, apart from what has happened before. And I'm talking about from March to today. The CD rate, for example, which was steadily climbing and was at 15.6 last month, and forecast by some to reach 17, looking at the average historical depreciation trend of the Ghana cedis, all of a sudden reversed. And not just reversed, it reversed acutely. Today, it was trading at around 10.3 as an average at Bank of Ghana rate. At the Forex bureaus, you can find dollars. If you find the dollars, you can find them at 11.5, 11.4. It's still going down. That's incredible. And so that's actually a 35% decrease on the purchasing power of foreign currency tied earnings of many and many of the contracts which are already priced in dollar. So in a way, it's a good thing if you are owing dollars. But if you are receiving in dollars, then that's a huge issue, because now you have to wait for the prices to catch up with parity. And at the moment, if you look at some of the reports from APSA, for example, the parity of the dollar is pegged at around $40 to CDs to a dollar. So we're at 10, which means that the CD is strengthened somehow, and it's not the normal path. But this is the situation which you have to deal with. The uncertainty will cause many investors to pause a bit to find out how we are going with this. So all of this is to paint a picture of what is currently going out there. And so if we wanted to look at what the budget statement was digested by PwC report, and they came up with 6 major trends. The first one is that government seems to be on the path to rationalize expenditure and to eliminate wasteful expenditure. So they are currently reviewing and eliminating waste from the system in order to reduce the unnecessary costs. The second is to optimize their domestic revenues by broadening their tax base. And they intend to collect more non-tax revenue to enhance tax compliance and modernize tax administration by leveraging digital technologies. So in other ways, widening the tax base and reducing the tax burden, and to use digital technology to achieve that. The third is to increase the share of domestic capital expenditure to spur economic growth and job creation. Because basically the economy was stagnating for a few months before the last election. We all know that. It's not a secret. It's very well known. That's why we went to the IMF in the first place a couple of years ago. So in order to jolt the economy back into economic development, we need to expend more capital so that the economy will restart. The fourth point is that to reduce the public debt to sustainable levels. Many of you have heard about the stories of Cocoa Board debt currently standing at 32.5 billion as of the end of last year, and then ECG's own ballooning to 80 billion. So who will come and invest in a company that owes 80 billion? And these are some of the examples which I thought was in the public domain anyway, so we're not revealing any secrets. The fifth point is to reduce the fiscal deficit progressively after amending the Fiscal Responsibility Act to promote debt sustainability. In other words, the minister and his government and the president and his team wants to make sure that when government agency heads are spending, they have the right authorizations and they have the justifications that are needed, not to import something that is already there, or not to spend on something that is already there or can be done elsewhere without having to bring it in from outside. And the sixth and last one is to restore confidence in Ghana's economy, especially the credibility of our contract sanctity, which has received a huge dent recently in Ghana. You will see many people holding contracts and waiting for payment of their outstanding debt. So all of this is not conducive to doing business and for investment, but it has to be said. Otherwise, we will be playing into the same old of luring investors into Ghana and then realizing after you sink in some significant money that there are some challenges that needs to be resolved before you can expand or before you can see a return on your investments. So that is from the distilled digest of the budget statement. So what are some of the areas that we have identified within the budget? You will notice some very interesting challenges coming from, not challenges, findings from the Ghana Trade Report 2024. The first one is that Ghana's exports in 2024 exceeded imports by 44.7 billion Ghana cedis, and that we had a trade surplus based on years of working towards developing an export-led development strategy. So some of the work has been bearing its fruits. So export has potential in Ghana. As you know, Ghana has a lot of vast potential in agribusiness and in the domain, and still attracts significant interest from the international business community. I recall last week when I was moderating the session at the Ghana EU Business Forum, basically the president set the right tone that Ghana was open for business again, and that some of the key areas to focus on include pharmaceutical, agriculture, logistics. And so all of these commitments are being made at the highest level. Now, what do we also have in the Ghana Trade Report? You can look at what the total trade per commodities are. And of course, the major export is gold. And then you will see that the export of cocoa is not that stable, but still contributes significantly, up to 28%. So gold is at 55% of the of our trade, and cocoa is 28%. So gold and cocoa still occupy more than 3/4 of the export. And that brings us back to the point we were talking about adding value into these exports. For example, cocoa. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire combined produce about 70%, somewhere between 60 and 70% of the world's cocoa, but they only benefit from 6% of the value of the confectioneries market. Why is that? We have to look at identifying the opportunities in adding value to Ghana's cocoa and Cote d'Ivoire's cocoa internally. So apart from that, I would like to move into recent developments, and this is where I think I would like also to help point out a few indicators, Tekla, because as we are moving forward, we realize that most of the opportunities in Ghana cannot be achieved unless we work on the fundamentals of, first of all, creating a suitable business reform environment, and the second, to address the cost of production in the country. And to address the cost of production, you have to target the two main areas, which are the power generation, and the second is overheads, and the third is transport costs. So these three are challenges that are making local manufacturing and production expensive, but these are also opportunities to find out how to plug in these gaps in infrastructural development. And we remember that our president was talking about partnerships, public-private partnerships in developing infrastructure. So all this taken into consideration, I think as a first volley of remarks, I think we will get into more details as we are moving forward. So for now, that's it from my end. Ghana is open to business. There are areas that are ready to be unlocked, and but there are also challenges that needs to be resolved, and these challenges reflect into opportunities. So let's try to see how we can work and zoom in on particular areas of investment opportunities as we move through with the presentation. So the floor is yours.
Very well, Ziad. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard from the speaker discussing some of the opportunities he sees, some of the challenges. In fact, he just mentioned these challenges are the opportunities we see from the direction the government is taking in inviting investments in the country. So the floor at this moment is open for questions and answers. And before we get to the questions and answers, I would want to point out a few other changes, or should I say policy directive, that you can see from the government, and one of which is the 24-hour economy policy or system that the government intends to put in place. And the purpose from yesterday's public discourse is for Ghana or the government to promote industrialization in the country. And just as Ziad mentioned in his presentation, you can see that our exports, even though we did so well last year, were mainly from gold and cocoa and less from the production side. But if we should increase the production side, then we're actually going to see a real impact on the economy or the currency of Ghana. And so the government intends to push industrialization through the 24-hour economy policy, which will be released, I think, today or next week, Tuesday. And then on the release of the policy, we get to see what benefits, what incentives, what reliefs are available for individuals or businesses that can register or that would want to take advantage of the 24-hour economy. An interesting aspect of this policy that we may want to take into consideration are the sectors of focus. So if there are going to be any incentives, any reliefs, any benefits, these benefits will be available to industries or businesses in the pharmaceuticals, both manufacturing, especially manufacturing and exports. They are going to go into agro processing. As Zia said, we need to be adding value to our raw materials. So investing in agro processing or agro industry is an area that the government is looking to invest in and give enough or enormous support. So you may want to consider that as an investment decision. The textiles, in fact, it was disclosed that it's one industry that employs the largest number of workers at a particular time. And so the government intends to give attention to the textiles industry. So it's also an area we can look into. Then light manufacturing, anything that we manufacture in the country, if you are going to set up manufacturing plants in the country so that we don't have to always import and bring in foreign goods, but then to promote our locally manufactured goods, which means that investing in manufacturing plants across different sectors is well welcomed. We should be producing matches, sticks, earbuds, and all of these things from or in the country. And of course, tourism was also mentioned as a sector of focus. And we have the transportation and I think that is also one area that they are very much focused on. Under the 24-hour policy, they want to revamp the Volta River corridor, making sure that goods can be easily transported from the north to the south through the rail lines from the Volta River through to Tema to their destinations or other destinations in the country. So transport and haulage systems are also sectors of focus. And of course, we have the technology and IT, because it's not only about manufacturing, it's not only about producing, but it's about producing with less cost and more efficiency. So those of us who are into the IT sector, who can develop or design processes that will make the production easier and faster, you are likely to get some benefits under the policy or the focus. And of course, the finance institutions are also welcome to bring in innovative ways of financing such projects. And Ziad has already mentioned the government is open to partnering with individuals. We also have the special economic zones as a sector that the government is very much interested in. And I think that most businesses in Ghana attest that having special economic zones is one of the means or ways that we can truly promote production and export in the country. So which means that individuals want to either go into development of special economic zones, industrial parks, or other big manufacturing entities. Individuals want to be tenants in special economic zones, want to operate in special economic zones are all welcomed, or these are business areas that we may want to consider as part of our investment strategy for 2025 and moving forward. Zia, did I miss anything?
No, I think you've mentioned it all. One thing I think we didn't focus enough on has to do with the high borrowing costs that is currently experienced in Ghana, because to do all of this infrastructural development, these are investment intensive initiatives. You can't just wake up one day and decide that you wanted to invest a few tens of millions of dollars into certain area without, first of all, finding out where the money is coming from. And at the current, just last week or even this week, I think it was this week, that the MPC committee met and decided to maintain the Bank of Ghana policy rate at 28%. I mean, you haven't even started with the, you haven't mentioned the marginal reference rate yet, and you're at 28%. So what kind of business are you going to expect people to pay 30% even before starting to pay out for your infrastructural investments? And so this is where there needs to be more favorable rules and regulations to allow people to come in. And this brings into focus the fact that part of the 24-hour economy, if I understood it well, was to create opportunities for concessional loans for individuals and organizations who are willing to invest into the main pillar and industries that were earmarked by the 24-hour economy, and to provide them with real incentives, whether reductions in their tax burdens or whether investment financial loans to help them to achieve these targets and to move forward with it. So that would be one aspect. And then apart from that, I think we mentioned, yes, the other point has to do with, well, Tekla, you spent a lot of time introducing me. If I wanted to do the same, introduce you, I'll remain here until tomorrow. But one particular portfolio I like that you manage has to do with the special economic zones. And special economic zones in Ghana, as you know, is a particular interest that we can use to drive in investors, both local and foreign. Because as you know, the earmarked facilities at the moment, whether at Tema Enclave or others, are getting choked. And so it's time to expand, but we have to do that in a regulated function. And that is where I wanted to mention the fact that there's a list of bills scheduled for introduction in Parliament at the table of our parliamentarians that includes Ghana Investment Promotion Authority Bill, the Ghana Deposit Protection Exemptions Amendments, the regulations, the customs amendments, so many of these. Of interest to us, particularly, is the Ghana Investment Promotion Authority Bill, but there's also something that was not added here, which is the special economic zones, I think because it was laid already, and that they are about to study it and to come back with the amendments. I'm not sure, but I wish that I saw the special economic zones bill among these. But for the time being, I know from the interaction with the Chief Executive Officer of Ghana Investment Promotion Center last week, Simon Maggi, that the decision was taken between our National Economic Dialogue discussion at the private sector engagement and today. They have managed to bring the new Ghana Investment Promotion Authority bill back to Parliament to discuss it, and then it is being reviewed currently. And as you know, it was ready for rollout until the AFTA investment protocol came out, and then it had to go back in order to align the regional text with the continental text, with the old text, and to come back with something that actually adds value and harmonizes with the rest of the laws across. So once we have that one cleared out of the way, then at least we'll know what is the kind of support and the kind of opportunity that Ghana at an official level can support. Otherwise, we'll get back to the situation where GIPC will travel the world, will invite investors, will give assurances, people will come, they'll go and knock on the door, say, oh, we have problem with customs, and then you say, my hands are tied. Nobody wants that. It's embarrassing, and at the same time, it is unfair.
Yeah.
I personally know several cases where several industrialists were convinced that they were allowed to bring in their agro-industrial machinery, tax exempt.
Yeah.
Which is very fair because you are coming up to set up a factory transformative in certain areas, whether agrochemicals or poultry or fruits and vegetables, slicing and dicing. They bring it to the port, they're worth millions of dollars, and then you decide that, oh, just last week, the minister has issued a cancellation of all exemptions because something, IMF. You can't just look at a justification at that level. You can't commit this kind of irresponsibility and mismanagement. The goods are there. They're in Tema. And now you're suggesting to people to house, to pay, and they apply for refunds later on. Whoever told you that they are coming in the first place? I don't know whether we can actually refer to this as some kind of, well, I don't know. Let's not go there because now it's a new chapter that's open again.
It's a new system, yes. Let's hope that things are better. Yes.
But remember something important, that governance is continuity. Yes, everybody understands that when different administrations come in, there are new policy priorities and there are new areas of focus and interest. Hell, look at what's happening in the US. All of a sudden, they decided that everything has to be shuffled. Fossil fuels was no longer taboo. LGBTQI was taboo. So many things have been changed and messed in the system. USAID was shut down. And that is in barely 3 months. So we still have 4 years of God knows what. So
Yeah.
you can't really thrive on this kind of policy unpredictability, not just on
Yeah.
a national level, but also with regional and global repercussions in some cases. Now, thankfully, in Ghana, whatever we do and we decide internally does not have global repercussions. It's actually global repercussions that comes and beats us around to remind us that we need to build some financial sustainability and resilience into our economic development. And the best
Absolutely.
way to target that is to address the root cause of the problem. In my case, you know me for a while, I've been a passionate advocate of the connectivity aspect, connecting people, connecting finance, connecting goods, connecting ports, connecting roads, all of this. Because if we don't get this level correct, if we don't connect our markets together seamlessly, then all that we do will be very inefficient. And it will undermine our competitivity in the globalized system. One of the main reasons why we are not thriving is because we have not achieved a volume of competitive trade in goods and services on a wider market. We've all held the hopes that the AFCFTA would bring in market integration and access to our local producers and developers. But there's always this back mindset of nationalism where people are afraid of opening up their markets, but still their eye is on the larger markets out there. And then they forget that if you open up your markets to others, others will have to also open up the markets to you and vice versa. You can't just look with one eye. So all of these are opportunities. And the AFCFTA has struggled to sell or to generate buy-in from the national populations across the various countries because they have failed to convince the main manufacturers and organized private associations that liberalization is not a taboo. If you open up the market, you open it for everyone. But then this brings us to the enforcement aspects of our rules and regulations. Many of our rules and regulations in Ghana and elsewhere, even at ECOWAS level, many of the rules and regulations are perfect. Some of them are very good. Some might be lousy, but most of them are good. But it's just the misapplication and the wrong enforcement and the weaker enforcement of the rules and regulations on a regional level. Because then you wake up and you say, whoa, it's my country, so you cannot. And this allows all kinds of funny politics to enter and to meddle with the pure intentions of creating a more enabling business system for your local manufacturers and producers. So the regional community was made to encourage local production and manufacturing. Instead, we have used it to lock out our systems out of the regional markets. And that is why ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme is not working. And that is part of the reason now, even though we are marking or commemorating 50 years of ECOWAS, it has happened at a period where a few of the founding members of ECOWAS have decided to withdraw. And this creates new dynamics. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because these dynamics will create opportunities, because these are landlocked countries. So what do landlocked countries need? They need access in and out for their exports and their imports. And Ghana is a very natural corridor into the landlocked countries of Burkina, Mali, and Niger. But we have to play our cards right. We have to look at our road infrastructures, connectivity, and then we have to look at the measures that we put in place to make sure that we create an enabling environment for trade to flow through our corridors in order to reap the benefit of this economic development along our corridors.
Awesome. And I like what you mentioned, the political instabilities make our topic today very important because the earlier you take advantage of the best policies today, the better, so that you know that within 4 years you are able to rake in as much as possible on your investments before there is any other change in the next 4 years. So, ladies and gentlemen, are with us, please, these times are very important in our business and investment decisions for 2025 and the years ahead of us. Please let us take advantage of all the opportunities we've discussed, both within Ghana And as our speaker ended on, within the sub-Saharan Africa and even Africa as a whole, because opportunities are broad now in terms of the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, with the amendment of the GIPC, which we are hoping to reduce minimum capital for foreign investment. We have opportunity to partner or to invite foreigners to come in and invest in our businesses in order to expand into other markets in Africa. So the opportunities are huge, and we hope that after today, we'll be making very practical steps towards taking advantage of the investments and business opportunities available to us now. Other sectors of interest that I failed to mention up, which also showed from the indicators last year that they helped contribute enough to the GDP was, I think, transport and storage. You've already mentioned Ziad. We have the information and communication tech that was also mentioned earlier. Finance was mentioned. Real estate was mentioned. Education was a very good area that also helped. Health and social work also helped. And then trade. The part that excited me most was repair of vehicles being recorded as part of the services that are contributing immensely to the GDP of Ghana. Meaning, if we are investing in a lot of mechanic shops or increasing or expanding mechanic shops alone in Ghana, our economy should be doing very well. And construction, even though this year the government's focus is not on construction, construction continues to remain a very relevant sector or business activity. Of course, the gold, the cocoa still remain at the top of the chart, but the other, I like this term that businessmen will use, low-hanging fruit, which will cost you less, but you are able to earn as much as necessary to get a good return on your investment. On this note, we'll bring our discussion to an end and open the floor for question and answers. Everyone, please, you can unmute, put up your hand and ask your question, or you can share in the chat. I actually have 5 questions on the WhatsApp. I will read.
I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
Yes. So ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open for your question. The first question I think you already discussed or you mentioned, the person was asking that if investment by foreigners is so expensive in Ghana, and I'm sure the person was mentioning or referring to the minimum capital requirement we have, then what other opportunities are there for foreigners? I think that you may want to readdress it if possible, but I think you mentioned a lot of them in your presentation already.
I was actually interested in a contribution by a friend, Martin Hiles, and you were speaking about low-hanging fruit. Some would say that Volta Lake transport is a low-hanging fruit because the Volta Lake is a gift, a combined gift from God and the long-for vision of Kwame Nkrumah. Well, you can say Nkrumah's vision was a gift from God, actually, for the country. But the fact remains is that we have the Volta Lake as an infrastructure itself. You don't need to build a lake, it's there. It connects the north to the south. At least 50% of the journey by land from Tema Port to all the way to the border can be shaved off. And then this would allow you to replace the road transportation by inland waterway transportation. And with the lake being existent day and night and with no maintenance needs, you really have already 24-hour infrastructure through the lake. All you have to do is to make sure that the operations match up with the availability of the resources. I think that's one thing. And I wonder how we want to go about it, but maybe what we should do is to ask the participants to raise their virtual hands, and then you can unmute them and give them the floor to give a question or contribution. But apart from that, all of the comments I see online is something that we have already discussed.
Yeah.
There's someone who discusses real estate and would like to know if anyone knows how to secure or win government construction contracts. Well, the answer today might be different after the laws pass on. So maybe we should hold on until we find out how the new procurement laws. I wonder, I haven't seen the procurement laws also there, or was it there and I didn't read it? No, because obviously the public procurement laws need serious overhaul to prevent abuses or misuses. But once
Right.
that one will change, then the way will be much clearer.
Yeah. So, addressing the first question too, it says, are there known and trusted groups of individuals to invest with small sums of money, kaika, less than 5,000, and to invest other assets such as buildings? What avenues there are for individuals to invest? Madam Linda, thank you for your question, but this question should go to investment advisors should I say licensed investment advisors by the Ghana GES. Someone should help me. Licensed investors. Sorry, so there's a regulator that regulates licensed investors, and they are able to advise on where you should put your money and how much you are going to get out of that money. It is very important that you visit. I'll find the name and put it on the page so that you visit their website and locate the licensed investment firms. They are the ones available. I know we have GCB Capital. EcoBank has an investment firm. Most of the financial institutions have their separate investment firms that are licensed to undertake such investments. So you can visit them and find out where you can be placing your small monies for some returns. Second question says, a trustable and financially responsible government will take a while to prove itself. It won't happen overnight. So meanwhile, what investment opportunities are unique to Ghana and more attractive than other possible investment countries? Yes, I think, Mr. Martin, thanks for your question. I think the speaker mentioned a lot of these opportunities, but what we'll say is, if you want if you want special, I wouldn't call it special, but if you want available support, because once the government is in place and once the government is saying these are my policy directive, that means all the government agencies will be working towards promoting the agenda of government. So even though there might be many other investment opportunities, the areas that the government says I want to focus on should be of much interest to you, so that when you go to the regulators or the investment institutions, you can get the right support available. So some which we mentioned earlier, we have the pharmaceuticals, we have the textiles, we have light manufacturing, we have agro processing, we have the gold and extractives, and then cocoa, adding value to our raw cocoa production. These are other sectors. These are the sectors of focus for the government in their policy this year and beyond. For myself, the transport sector by inland water is a unique opportunity, currently only available in Ghana, ready to go. The competition is road transport, which is expensive and unreliable across Ghana. Only one workable road between the food in the north and the hangar in the south. The president yesterday made a good point in that one aspect of a 24-hour economy will be to use transport. Absolutely. So we have transport infrastructure that will be working 24 hours in Ghana to ensure that the movement of goods to and from the south, from the north to the south is available. So yes, good points. Thank you, sir. Ekua says, my concern has to do with the issues of land or property acquisition for investment purposes. Investors must acquire a space for their business operations. Are the laws regulating property acquisition robust enough? Okay, so that is a very important question. In fact, it's a very important area that the government has also addressed enormously. I think going forward, the government intends to have land banks, where if you go to maybe the Lands Commission, you go to Ghana Free Zones, or you go to the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, they will have available lands that are litigation free, and that investors can acquire for their respective businesses. So the processes are cumbersome. It's not more of the regulatory processes, but more of the ownership system we have in the country. So until the mechanisms are in place to ensure that the land banks are easily accessible, what we can say is that you pay very much attention when you're acquiring land in Ghana. Always make sure that your lawyers are involved from the start, and they are finding ways of protecting your interests in order to reduce all the cumbersome risk and cost involved. Izziad, I don't know if you have anything else to add at this point.
Not really. I think you have approached the subject very exhaustively. I was actually reading one of the other questions that have to do with the electric vehicles, and it's coincidentally it happened when I was looking at double checking something on Google Map, and I find out that you actually have the option of selecting along the route EV charging on Google Maps. So that's how pervasive the technology is, and that Ghana is trying to position itself in the EV market, even though the regulatory aspects of it are still in its infancy stage. But it is also one of the priority areas that government wants to look at by looking at renewable energy sources and at decarbonizing the transportation industry. I think it is still early stage, and the ecosystem is huge, as you know. And of course, the the drive towards sustainable and renewable energy has reduced a bit because of the shift in policy at Washington. But still, that doesn't mean that decarbonization of the roads is not a priority in itself, because of the impact of the excessive use of our road infrastructure, both in terms of environment, but also in terms of degradation of the environment and the destruction of the assets of the road infrastructure. I think one of the main areas that we haven't approached yet, and it is in the back of most of the both perspective and actual investors, is the fact that the law enforcement of the current rules and regulations needs to be addressed so that the confidence of the investor and the businessman will be restored, and that people will no longer be thinking about reducing their footprint, their investment footprint, but rather expanding. For expansion to happen is for you to have trust and confidence in a thriving system. You can trust the system and have confidence in the system, but you need to have a thriving environment so that people will be convinced to bring in their resources, their expertise, their finances, and set up shop or expand their footprint and help you to increase your economic development. Apart from that, we can talk all we want about the good intentions, but the good intentions and the political will are a good starting point. Now, what we have to do is to identify the challenges, address these challenges, and then we will be able to more confidently sell out the investment opportunities and look for the much important partnerships that will come in with a win-win situation for both parties.
Awesome, great. And someone says, Nana, I agree with the connectivity and investments in transport sector needs rehauling. Passenger and cargo rail would be a huge win to the economy. Absolutely. And yes, thank you. I've seen the comments. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the regulator, please, anyone who has money and wants to invest the money, please make sure that you go to the SEC website. You research for licensed investment firms, and then you visit their office for the products they have before you start investing. Don't go and give your money to any entity which is not licensed. You will enter a risk of losing your investment. And for the land available, I see a comment from Dixon, I think is important, says that companies like Agility have acquired litigation free within the free zone enclave, and other investors can do the same or get ready to move in solutions from Agility. So yes, of course, other than the government land banks that are that are available or will be rolled out soon. Private companies have acquired huge lands which they are giving for purchase by other investors or individuals. And these, as much as possible, also litigation free and can be areas that any investor looking for land can consider for their investment decision. Ladies and gentlemen, are there any more questions? Or does anyone want to put up his or her hand? Okay, so I think Ziad, you can give your closing remarks at this point. I've seen one new message. Okay. Oh, you're welcome, Madam Linda. Yes, Ziad, I think you can go ahead to give your closing remarks at this point.
Yeah, I think so. This was intense, and I would like to thank you for involving me on this one, Tekla. We might not have went as deep as we wanted into the budget aspects, but of course the idea is to strike a conversation around what are the opportunities and the challenges, and then to look at sending out the signals that the economy is on a growth path and that there's a reset economy agenda that is currently rolling out. There are new developments on the way coming in, and at the same time, there are changes all around us, and this should also give us reason to work on the sustainability and resilience of our national economies. So with this one, I thank you all for taking time off your busy schedules to work with us for this hour. We remain available for questions. And I think if Tekla, you can provide later on, if you have access to the databases of the registered participants, you might like to send them some of the information which we were feeding from, and this will also help guide them into their own conclusions as we move forward, hopefully into a more prosperous and thriving Ghana in 2025 and beyond. So thank you all for listening, and thank you for being with us.
Many thanks, Ziad. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, you can see on my screen that I have shared with you a document. So as lawyers, and as much as we enjoy promoting business and investment in the country, the most important is to make sure that your investment is protected, is safe, and it is legally compliant. We have put together a summary of the regulatory requirements for some sectors in Ghana, which are very sustainable over the years, and which, if anybody wants to invest in, you can easily refer to that document and get the legal or regulatory compliance or legal and regulatory requirement. If you have any question, you can reach us via our WhatsApp numbers or email. You can also visit our website. We have a link there that you can download the document and review or read for yourself. So in it, you can access a lot of these regulatory requirements. Please, let us not just do business. If you are investing business, it is important that you get your returns back, and your business should not be fraught with legal liabilities and legal issues here and there. So please get a copy of this book, read it, and protect yourself. You can reach out to us anytime for any question you may have regarding anything you might have read in the magazine. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, it's always been wonderful having you join us. Thank you for taking the time. And no, wait, I missed one thing. Jude, I think you requested for government contracts. Sorry, I didn't read that comment because we are coming up with a session on government contracts for construction. So don't worry, keep following us, and then when the time is due, you join and we'll give you all the information. But you can also get onto the magazine. There's a section on government contracts where you can review and know what to do, where to start from, and then who to contact. You can reach out to us too at any time, as already said. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Bye-bye.